Welcome back. International Women's Day has been observed since the early 1900s. It was a time of great turbulence in the industrialized world that saw booming population growth and the rise of radical ideologies. Since its birth, International Women's Day, celebrated on March the 8th, has grown to become a global day of recognition across developed and developing countries alike. Youmna?
Yes, thanks you, Noor. Counting down the weeks until March 8, we are hosting a series of inspirational women in Lebanon and the Arab world. Our first guest today is political communications consultant Carol Malouf. Last month, Carol co-wrote an article titled "Syrian Girls Sold into Forced Marriages," describing the situation in refugee camps in Zaatari, Jordan, where underage Syrian girls have become victims of trading. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you. Thanks
so
for
I
having
want
me.
to start with this article and what prompted you to write such a controversial and such a sensitive subject, the subject of underage girls being sold into marriage.
It is indeed. My colleague and I from the Daily Telegraph, Ruth Sherlock, went to Jordan to interview the defected Syrian Prime Minister back then, Riyad Hijab. And while we were at the hotel, we met a group of female activists from around the region who were documenting these underage girls being, well, so-called sold into marriages. And we accompanied them to the Zaatari camp the next day, and it was an investigation that went on for 2-3 days to try to find out what was really going on with these girls. And
so what you found out was that?
We found out that under the dire conditions that these families are going through in Zaatari camp and the refugees in general in Syria, you know, women and children are the most vulnerable in times of war. So some people, unfortunately some men from the region, were taking advantage of these girls. So they would go and find underage beautiful girls, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, offer a very minimal amount of money in return for these girls. So the problem was that these marriages were not legal. They just do some form of illegal papers and then tell them, once we go back to our countries, we'll call you and bring you over, and then they wouldn't hear back from them.
Right, and I quote your article here: many Syrian girls have been impregnated and abandoned in this way. So a lot of these men promise to shelter them and provide for them and eventually just leave them there with no form of protection or security.
Unfortunately, yes, and with very, very minimal amounts of money as well. Now, the controversy with this issue is that in Islamic cultures or religiously in countries that follow the Islamic rule, there is no legal age, meaning in the civil courts there's the 18 years age, but in Islamically the sheikh or the dad can deem fit whether the girl is, you know, fit
for marriage
or not.
Right,
exactly.
Right.
And the money that is being paid is the dowry. So if you look at it from a legal Islamic point of view, some people think there's nothing wrong with that. We're paying the dowry, the sheikh or the dad.
But how did you feel? I mean, did it shock you? I know that you are a journalist amongst a lot of different things, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But for somebody like you to go after the story, even going undercover in order, you said that one of your colleagues went undercover to try to see if he could fake trying to buy a girl, etc. And basically, for you, when you think about it, why was it important to bring the story out?
You know, once you choose to go into that form of investigative journalism, you want to give a voice to the voiceless. You want to tell the story of the people who are unable or are vulnerable or are weak to go and tell it themselves, or they have no platform, they're scared. Especially when you're a refugee in a country, you know, you're really scared to get kicked out, to go back to the war zone. So these people don't really have a platform to voice whatever is going on with them. So we wanted to be that voice for these girls who are going through these conditions.
Speaking of platform, you didn't start off here. It started off when you were a founding member, co-member, we should say, of Al-Jazeera English. So this is how your story began. So can you tell us a bit about where it started and how you're here today.
Yes, I was with an English channel in Dubai, and I heard that Al-Jazeera was launching an English channel. So like everybody else, I just sent a random CV to an HR@aljazeera.net, I remember at the time, and I got a call. So I went, I was interviewed, and I was lucky to be one of the few who was, the founding members of Al-Jazeera English. I was back then in early 2006, because Al-Jazeera launched in November 2006, so 6-7 months before launch, I was the only Arabic-speaking journalist in the newsroom back then. And I stayed there for 5 years, and I came back.
And today you are a consultant, and you're starting your own company. So tell me a little bit about how that came about. You left Al-Jazeera 5 years after you joined.
Yes.
So in 2011.
Yes. And then I started roving and writing for different publications on different Middle East affairs, and consulting for politicians. And then one thing led to the other, and through political contacts, I recently set up a company that does investments in emerging markets, mainly, like countries like South Sudan and Yemen,
so still very newsworthy countries and newsworthy nations, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So you didn't completely leave the whole news industry.
No, my heart is in these countries, where the suffering is and where people need help. So whether through investment or journalism, I try to do my best.
We were talking about this earlier. You were raised by a single mother, and I know that your siblings have gone into the restaurant business, etc. And we were talking about you going against the current and doing your own thing, and it takes a lot of boldness to do that. So tell me a little bit about how was it? How do you get the strength to kind of be like, well, the businesses are doing really well, but I'm going to do my own thing?
Yeah, my mother was widowed at a very young age, and I was very young as well. So everybody expects you to go into the family business because that's what they do. And it's difficult to challenge the norms and, go beyond what they expect of you and try to go what we call the road less traveled and try to make your own way. So especially for a girl in that part of the world, it's not very common. So yes, it was a difficult journey, I have to say, but a very, very pleasurable one. Like if I had to go back in time, I'll do the same thing. The exposure and the opportunities and the learning experience that you get with international news organizations and the places you go. But what's really important when you do all this is to come back to Lebanon and bring that experience with you. And when I first came, I was lecturing at Notre Dame University. I lectured for 2 years, and I had the opportunity to share this experience with my students. And it's always rewarding, to give something of what you have learned back to your country and to the people here. So yeah, it's been an exciting journey, and I look forward to the time ahead.
To what's coming up next.
Yeah.